Welcome to the Daily Objective. Today we're going to talk about game theory and specifically how people apply it in economics and if it's a good idea or not. To discuss this with me is Alejandro. Alejandro, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, Daniel. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Okay, can you give our viewers a basic introduction to what game theory is?
Certainly. First of all, it's a mathematical theory that is developed or was developed pretty much on the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and still today, but the real hype for the theory was in the 50s and 60s. And the whole idea is how can we mathematically think about games? And when we talk about games is Monopoly, tic-tac-toe, chess. What are the best ways in which one can strategize in how to and win this kind of games? Some games are pretty much very simple, like tic-tac-toe, and they have been solved. And other games are more complex, such as chess. Now, in economics, this is typically taught in an advanced course of microeconomics. And there is a very specific reason why it's taught at that time. And it is because during advanced micro, you will see the modern version of what the invisible hand is for neoclassical economics. There's a very famous theorem, which is the Arrow-Debreu theorem, which basically says that every competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimal. What does that mean? Basically, that the free market, when it's left free, it achieves a result such that everyone in that economy is the best of. If you try to change something, then you will have someone losing or being worse off. Now, in game theory, and very specifically with the Nash equilibrium. And remember, if anyone has seen the movie Beautiful Mind, it's about John Nash, the one who developed this theory and the one who developed this conclusion. In the Nash equilibrium, you will have some results or some equilibriums where you can have different types of actions of people which makes people better off. But at the same time, if everyone tries to achieve their own selfish personal interest, then the result will be worse off. Yeah, I will develop more of that further. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, maybe just to concretize it a little bit, and we can do it from the movie. The example they used is there were, I think, 5 guys at a bar looking at this a couple of beautiful ladies, but one was much more beautiful than the other ones. And they're like, okay, we are all gonna try to get this one. And one of them, the Nash is, wait, no, Adam Smith was wrong. If we all pursue our selfish interest, the society at all will not benefit. If they all go for the one, none of them will get them, and the other girls will feel, okay, I don't want to be a second choice, and they won't go with them either. If instead they all go for each woman, or every guy goes for a different woman, then all of them can benefit. And that was like the example of why Adam Smith's everyone pursues their selfish interests, benefit society doesn't apply, and people benefiting or like trying to pursue their own and the group's interest.
Exactly. And in that sense, it's violate, and the movie is very explicit about this. They say, oh, Adam Smith is wrong, or wrong in this particular case, as people would say, teaching game theory. And there is a better outcome as long as we frame the game and our strategy in a different way, not just ourselves trying to seek out what we want without thinking what others want as well. And I think related to this, I was wondering if I could share my screen just to show you probably what is the most famous, the most famous game theory game that has been devised. Can you see my screen? So basically, this is what is called the prisoner's dilemma. You have two people are caught during a crime. Let's say that two people killed a man, and the police has enough evidence to convict them for 1 year. But they want to be really, they want to make an example of this case, and they say to the prisoners who are held apart in each room, and they cannot communicate with each other. They tell them, we have enough evidence to convict you for 1 year, but if you confess, you won't go to jail, and your partner will get 10 years in jail. And if both of you confess, however, you will have 2 years in jail. Now, what shall you do? And if you see this, this is I will talk a bit more about this later. But if this is a way that it's usually and typically framed, there's one prisoner with two types of faction, and the other prisoner with the other types of factions. And for instance, let's take a look at how prisoner B would look at the case. If he confesses, if prisoner A would decide to confess, then what is the best decision that prisoner B could take? Well, it would be confess, because he would only be taking 2 years, while if he didn't confess, he would take 10 years in jail. So even if the other partner would confess, then his best outcome would be confessing as well. And what would happen if the prisoner A did not confess? How would prisoner B be better off? Well, confessing as well, because instead of getting 1 year, he would get 0 years in jail. And that could be observed as well with the choices of prisoner A. Now, in turn, you will see that the equilibrium, the point where the final outcome that you will get, according to Nash, is that both prisoners will confess. Now, if you see this as an economist, you will notice that actually the better outcome would have been that both prisoners wouldn't confess. That would be the optimal point. However, because of the framing of this game or of this situation, at the end they decide to confess both of them, which is quite the struggle and partially what Nash is trying to say in that movie.
So if I can just talk about something right now, I heard about this prisoner's dilemma a long time ago. I can't remember when, but the first time I think I was already familiar. Maybe I haven't even been familiar with objectivism, but when I looked at it, I was like, there's something wrong here. I don't know exactly what it is. It's either maybe this, Ayn Rand in her book, The Virtue of Selfishness, talks about the ethics of emergencies. And it seemed a little bit like that, like you're trying to base a theory of like crazy, like lifeboat situations, or, you're going to jail, do you confess or not? What do you think about this? Am I on the right track?
I would agree. I think that there is some extent in which this is the problem is in the framing of the issue. Like, for instance, here you're talking about two criminals. I mean, you can make it a different game or a different situation where you don't involve negative behavior of people, and actually it can be about the game, tennis game. But I think the crucial thing here is that yes, there are places and situations where there is a zero sum, but as such, I think the overall issue is that you don't need that every situation in life has to be optimal and better for every one of you. And I think if you want to take a look at if things are moral or optimal to one extent, you shouldn't be seeing at just one situation or anything else. You should be asking yourself, like, why am I in that situation? Why am I playing this prisoner's dilemma? Is it a game? Is it for enjoyment? Is it just because? And in that sense, you can say that a rational person wouldn't set itself in a position like this if it wasn't that he's seeing the overall extent of this situation.
So we already talked about how it violates the invisible hand. Would you like to add something on it? Maybe explain it further.
No, I think I want to talk further about how this theory is compatible with objectivism later, and I will talk about the relationship between objectivism and the invisible hand, or at least my interpretation of that. But I think we could move on to the positive versus normative issue.
So yeah, I have
or
it.
Any question?
Yeah, can you try to explain it? Because I read up on it a little bit, but yeah, what is the positive versus normative theory? Or what do you think?
So this is a common theme, probably in all humanities, but especially in economics, there's lots of bogus on this. And the whole notion is, one is a positive realm, which tries to explain how people behave, what they do, what they want, whatever is given, and whatever you can study as a scientist, it's a positive. And the normative is when the realm of ethics comes from, like, how should people behave? What is the best strategies to achieve this kind of stuff? What are values? What are good outcomes? Everything like that has to do with the normative. Now, game theory as such, in the way that it's framed by mathematics, is a normative theory. It tells you how to behave upon certain circumstances to achieve a certain goal. Do you want to win tic-tac-toe? You should start crossing upwards and to the right. I don't know tic-tac-toe, just an example, but do you want never to lose in tic-tac-toe? You should start at the center or something like that. However, in economics, it's often the case that it's treated as a positive theory. And what that means is that they try to explain human behavior from game theory. They say, oh, people will stop thinking because thinking is not a good idea. It's energy expenditure, and therefore, because game theory tells you so, that there is no reason to think in certain circumstances. I think
the one way I saw the prisoner's dilemma or the game theory used, let's say, in economics, and you could say even from our perspective in a positive sense, is the tragedy of the commons.
Mm-hmm.
If all property is commonly held, then it's in everyone's, well, your own selfish interest means you should just consume it because someone else will consume it.
Mm-hmm.
But it says in the more collective or like a group well-being, you should try to like preserve it or develop it or whatever. If it's like a field, you want to develop it, you don't want to consume all your seeds.
Indeed, yes. And it's compatible. One of the solutions that it has been given, and I think it's compatible with game theory, is the Ronald Coase's solution, which is basically make people internalize the effect or the negative effect of the tragedy of the commons, and then people will try to take into account that, and the problem will be sorted out, which is more or less the idea of assigning property rights to that issue. Now, there's there are two other things that I think are wrong with the positive theory, and that is that there are multiple ways in which you can see equilibriums in game theory. We were talking about the Nash equilibrium, but there are countless equilibriums, and you will be able to see a myriad amount of examples of equilibriums, and each one of them is good and it's bad enough, but and it's designed to sort out or solve the problems which the previous equilibrium hadn't been able to solve. Like with the behavioral economists try to see if indeed this kind of worlds or games that are framed really have something to say about the world that they can predict. And what they have in average result is that they are not very good at predicting reality, and that there are some special cases where they cannot. So what happens instead of economics saying, let's not try to go with game theory anymore, they say, oh, let's make it more complex and add probability and so on. And at the end, what you have is really complex models that are applicable to very specific circumstances and which don't constitute a theory anymore.
Yeah, that's why game theory usually applies to games, because games have a certain amount of rules, certain amount of possibilities. Even something as complex as chess can technically be solved. I have a friend who's really into chess, and he said I don't remember the exact number, but they like solved the game with like maybe 6 figures or something, which means if you start with like just the 6 figures instead of the whole row, which you usually do, they said what is the best movement in all the cases, what is the best movement and all. And I think they even said that the white has advantage, like there's a certain percentage of advantage or something like that. Or even like you said, tic-tac-toe, that's really easy to solve. By the way, you don't want to start at the center. If both players play real, or like if both players play decent, if you start in the center, you will always die. If you start in the one of the corners, you have a little bit better chance for them to make a mistake and you can win.
Well, actually, that proves my point, because I think one my essential criticism to the idea of game theory being a positive theory is that I think they assume, or the implicit concept behind this is that there is determinism in that people will be able to sort out these games and that they know what the better strategy is. And maybe they won't get it well the first time, but maybe the second, third, 30 times afterwards, they will be able to sort out the game and they will be playing at their best. And that is completely false. I mean, I didn't know, I played tic-tac-toe all my life, and I don't know which are the better strategies to play with. And I think the best example of this is mechanism design, which is basically how to frame a game, how to set up a game so that you can get the best results. And one of the things that happens there is auction theory, how to frame an auction so that you can get the better price. And the results that you get are actually integrands and differentials, and they assume that you are calculating that in your mind with perfect probability in your mind, which is completely crazy.
Okay, so we only have about 5-6 minutes left, so let's move on to if it's compatible with objectivism. Because like they often present the wrong side, like the confessing always. It's like the selfish. This is like your own self-interest. But even in the case of the prisoner's dilemma, I feel like even like a actual rational objectivist, even if he it also implies that you're all the criminal, so it's already putting you in a bad position. But yeah, what do you think about the game theory and its relation to objectivism?
Well, I would say that as such, they apply to different realms. One is philosophy, the other is mathematics. So in principle, I don't think that there are incompatibilities between each other as theories. Now, this is my interpretation. I'm not speaking about objectivism, but I certainly think that you can hold both of the theories in a proper way, and they won't be antagonistic to each other. Now, I think that if you apply the determinism premise, then there would be a conflict indeed.
So what about the relation? I know objectivists or capitalists don't usually talk about the invisible hand. But in the, maybe relating to that, do you think there is a conflict?
You mean if game theory proves that the invisible hand is worthless? I think it proves that it's not an overwhelming concept, and I do think that not always the free market will get you the best of possible worlds, but it certainly will give you all the freedom that you have to achieve that world. And in that sense, I think, in many senses, neoclassical economics, which is what like mainstream theory of economics, I think in that sense is wrong. But yeah, and in that sense, it's one of the few examples where you can find categorically proven that there is there could be some issues about that. But I don't think, as such, the invisible hand is the justification of capitalism as we know. And I don't know if you want to add something to that, Daniel.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I always base my defense of capitalism on ethical grounds. I never try to really base it that much on like the practical. I mean, it's clear that it's more practical. I mean, everyone's seen the North Korea, South Korea on satellite with all the lights, or West and East Germany. But yeah, there might be cases. I heard of cases when like privatizations really were bad. I think I think it was Germany when they tried to privatize roads, but they like did it in a wrong way, so it failed and something like that. So you always you should never put too much stake on privatization and capitalism. It's always going to be more productive. Sometimes it might fail for a little bit until the internal works get fixed and it can get the long-term effects of capitalism. But you always have to remember the reason why we want capitalism is because it's moral. That's why we advocate for it. It starts with ethics, or it starts metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and then politics. You don't start with politics. So we have a couple minutes left. Do you have anything else to say, maybe in general or specifically with relation to objectivism?
I would say, as a conclusion, that probably if you want to think about game theory, it's okay. Try to search it or frame it as a normative theory, as a theory that tells you how to behave or how to clarify the incentives of people, but be careful with the positive part of the theory. If it's trying to describe how people behave, be very careful about it.
Okay, I think this has been a great episode. Thank you so much, Alejandro. Coming up in 5 minutes, we have the reality show on, are companies always responsible for the actions of their employees? So there's been this story about this father who had an autistic daughter. They like missed their flights. Customer service was really unhelpful, and they ended up losing like £2,500 just with like hotel fees, buying new tickets and all that. And we're going to discuss if companies should be held liable, especially if it's maybe work of like one employee who really screwed up. And then at 10 p.m. UK time, we have TV Talk. That's Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Buani, and Jacqueline Schumann. They're going to talk about the first season of Peaky Blinders. So have you seen that show?
I haven't.
You have to check it out.
Bit violent to me.
You have you have 4 hours, so you have first season in 4 hours, then you can watch TV Talk.
Well, maybe 2x.
Okay, thank you, Alejandro, so much.
Cheers.
And we'll see everyone in the reality show. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Daniel.